Hi, and welcome everybody. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education at the Davis-Phinney Foundation. And today we are going to be talking about creating your Parkinson's Life Assessment, or your PLA, with Greg Richter. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. So happy to have you. And I also have four other people who have been sort of our PLA test cases. We have Judy Freitag, Joe.
Hello.
Hello, Judy. Joe Vander Corvin. I never can pronounce it right. Coverden. How do you say it?
Think of Vancouver.
Oh,
Vancouver.
Coverden. Okay. And Patty Burnett. Hello, Patty. How are you?
Oh.
And Bart Narder. How are you, Bart? You're muted. He's fine. He's muted. We're excited to have you guys here today. This is a little bit different than some of the webinars we've done. It's a very workshop type of webinar, because we want to make sure that at the end of the day, you go home with something that you can take action on, that you've created. May not be the perfect all-encompassing plan, but it's a starting point. And it's something where you can start to look at how you're living well with Parkinson's, if what you're doing right now is working well for you, or if there are some things that you kind of want to pay a little bit more attention to. And Greg is going to walk us through this really cool tool that he's created, and he's helped lots of people go through this process. So we think it's going to be a really interesting workshop. Before we get started, I just want to walk through this Zoom platform for those of you who are not super familiar with it. If you look down, actually, the first thing to look at is on the top of your screen, on the top right-hand side, you'll see something that says, probably says speaker view or gallery view. If you click gallery view, then you will see all 6 of us in the screen right now. If you pick speaker view, you're just gonna see me, and that's not super great. So if you wanna see everybody at the same time, it's kind of nice to like watch the conversation. Otherwise, you're just gonna see the person who's speaking. The second thing is, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see something, a little icon that has chat. If you click that open right now, wow, mine is now working in a weird way. It should open up to the right-hand side of your computer, if that's how you have it set up. And you will see, not seeing speaker gallery view option. Okay, great. So just scroll to the top of like this little, the Zoom square, basically the Zoom dashboard, and scroll over to the top right of that thing, and you'll see like it says enter full screen, or it says speaker view. Okay, so you're in gallery view right now, and and it probably says speaker view at the top, because then you could switch to that, David. That should be great, but I would keep it like this for now. If you've never used chat before, you will see something at the little bottom. It says probably popped up, and it's a little blue button. It says all panelists, or it says all panelists and attendees, or something like that. If you want to send a message, actually, why don't you try it? If you try and send a message to all attendees, panelists, and this way I'll get a sense if you're working the chat correctly. Just click the blue button. Hello, Mary. Yes, Wes. Excellent, Bob. This is fabulous. Everybody's working great. Hello from Michigan. Okay, so you know how to do this. So you just kind of type your little question in there. I'm going to be monitoring that chat. I'm going to be looking at it for questions. And if you need to talk to me personally, privately, then you can click that little arrow, and it probably says my name, Melanie Dizon or Mel Dizon, or host. And if you click that, you can just speak to me privately and nobody else will see it. Just be very careful that if you don't want something to go to the whole group, don't send it to all panelists and attendees, just send it to me. Okay, so, and that's the place to send questions. Let's see. Hi, Debbie from Jerusalem, Israel. Wow. Thank you so much for being here. I can't see myself. Okay. And how do I use audio and video? You don't use video on this, for those of you who are asking. The only people on video are the people, the 6 of us who are going to be part of this. And then you don't have audio either, because we're just going to be taking your questions from chat to keep the lines clean. Hello from South Carolina, John. So great to see all of you here. We're excited. Okay, so Greg, I'm going to introduce Greg. Greg is a friend of the Davis-Phinney Foundation. He's done a couple of webinars and interviews with us before. He's got a great story, so I don't want to ruin that and tell his story. So he's going to do that. But this is something that sort of, it was really interesting. He brought this from his business life and said, like, what are some of the things, what are the tools that really worked for me well when I was in business and when I didn't have Parkinson's? And then he brought it to Parkinson's and said, you know, how can I use this to help myself and then other people? So we're really excited to have him here today. So Greg, why don't you do a little introduction, and then I'm gonna have our ambassadors talk a little bit about themselves as well.
Certainly. Hello, everybody. Hope today's session is both educational and empowering. I think we, Parkies is what I call my fellow Parkinson's people, but we Parkies, I think as a rule, need to take a more active approach in what they're doing. To show you that I'm an expert, I'll just tell you real quickly how I found out I had Parkinson's disease. I had noticed a little tremor in my pinky finger, went to my general practice doctor, and he informed me I had benign essential tremor. And that sounded cool because I didn't know how to spell it. So I went along with it. But within a year, my hand was now tremoring. My daughter married an Australian, and they wanted to come to Colorado to see snow. They were from the Brisbane area. And so we had a destination wedding up in Estes Park. And they drive on the other side of the road, the British side of the road. They'd never driven in snow, so I rented a bunch of limousines. As father of the bride, I went to the wedding chapel with my daughter and the other bridesmaids, and they got in the car, and everybody was like, "Oh, the bouquet, you know, from the lady's flowers is amazing. It's an amazing smell." And I thought, that's funny, I can't smell anything. And I thought, you know, maybe if you buy the flowers, you can't smell them or something like that. And so I didn't want to say anything to upset anybody, but after the wedding and the reception and everything, I was showering and I asked my wife, "Do you have a shampoo where you couldn't miss the distinctive odor?" And of course she did. And I couldn't smell anything. And you go to your iPad and type in tremor and no smell, one word comes up, starts with a P, ends with an Parkinson's. So I kind of self-diagnosed myself. That was back in the early part of 2011. So I've been living with Parkinson's or diagnosed for 9 years. I've probably been experiencing it now that I know the symptoms for about 10. So that's my story in figuring out that I have Parkinson's, and I've been working at learning to thrive in life despite having Parkinson's ever since.
Great. Thanks, Greg. We'll get to know a little bit more as you begin your presentation. Patty, can you tell us a little bit about you and you know, how you became to be an ambassador with the Davis Phinney Foundation?
Well, I'm from Summit County, Colorado, and used to work on the ski patrol at Copper Mountain and did search and rescue dogs and led a pretty exciting life for a long, long time. It's still exciting, but different exciting. 7 years ago, I got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and yeah, it's interesting because you're just going along minding your own business and suddenly wham, upside the head. But I found it's been a pretty amazing adventure, this Parkinson's thing. And I especially like what Greg has said as far as being able to do the life assessment, because I'm finding that I need to be real specific about what my goals are at this point. And there's a limited amount of time to do it. And like Greg says, it's kind of our 11th hour. Well, I don't know, maybe our last, what do you call it, Greg? Last quarter.
Fourth quarter.
Quarter of our lives. And so we should make it count. And I think that this will really help us all do that.
Great. Thanks, Patty. Bart, what about you?
Well, I figured out I had Parkinson's on my bicycle. At first, when I pedaled really hard up a road called Page Mill Road in Palo Alto, I noticed my left hand would shake just for a millisecond, and then it would stop, and I figured it was because I was hammering putting extra pressure on my spine, and I just had a pinched nerve. And then later that year, I did a big ride called Levi Leipheimer's Gran Fundo. And I was climbing this mountain, and it started getting wet and cold, and my left arm just took off. It just shook so much because I was shivering, and I had Parkinson's. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what it was. I had to get sagged out because I was afraid to descend the mountain with my arm shaking so much. So then I started going to various doctors. First, I went to my orthopedic doctor who had operated on that shoulder and said something's wrong with the shoulder because my arm shakes. And then I went to a physical therapist, and then I went to someone else. Then I went to a neurologist who 10 seconds after I walk in the door, he says, Parkinson. And that was kind of my journey. That night I Googled it and found that there was a center of excellence about 5 miles from my house at the Parkinson's Institute. Faxed in my application the next morning and told my boss a week later and gave me a year's notice.
Wow, that is a story. Interesting. Joe, what about you?
Well, my track record is pretty close to Greg's. I'm about 8 years diagnosed, but I actually lost my sense of smell 20 years ago. And it was during cancer treatment, and I thought it was related to the chemotherapy that I went through. And that's what I always blamed it on, that I had no sense of smell after my cancer treatment. But it turned out that, 8 years ago, I was losing the use of my left hand for typing. I couldn't control the fingers. So that caused me a problem. Then my son noticed I carried my left arm kind of weird, and I dragged my left leg a little bit. And he said, Dad, I think you might have had a mini stroke or something there. And, so I started going to get tests from doctors, and actually went through a year of tests with different doctors. And finally, my family doctor he said, I can't figure this out. I have no idea. Just go to the emergency ward and check yourself in and tell them it's getting worse. And so that's what I did. And then after a day of tests and sitting around dressed quite fashionably in those blue outfits they give you, the neurologist came in about 4 o'clock and pronounced me a Parky. So it was quite emotional at the time, but he says, when do you want to start the medication? I says, well, right now. So that was the start of my journey. Now I've got a great neurologist in Toronto, Dr. Lang, and I think the program works. And I really enjoy Greg's information here too, because I can see how that information helps me understand why I'm doing what I'm doing.
That's great. That's excellent. Judy, how about you? You're still muted, just real quick.
Hi, I'm Judy, and I guess I'm the old one in the group because I've had it for 17 years. And when I first got it, it wasn't too obvious, and I was still working, being the primary income provider for our family with 3 boys. So I had to be very careful not to have work be affected by that. But now I'm retired, and since that time, I've learned a couple things. I didn't start the medication right away. I'm one of those ones that does not like to take drugs. Now it's more like better living through chemistry, bring them on. And even though I know I have Parkinson's, I am not Parkinson's. I hate Parkinson's, but please don't hate me. And I've also learned that the exercise is key to my management of the symptoms. And the PD drugs are actually okay if they can improve the quality of your life.
Great. I'm just going to make a real quick comment for those of you who are wondering. A couple of things have come up in the chat. We cannot see or hear you unless you are one of the 6 that are on the screen who are presenting. So if you are trying to get your video working, it will not work. There's no way for it to work because that's been turned off. And your also audio cannot work. The only way to communicate audibly is just a text to me in the chat box. And that's going to be the case for the rest of the session. It's just the presenters on the screen. Okay. And so if you can see and hear us, you're all set. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to let Greg take over, and he's going to begin his presentation. And we're going to do a little bit of this. He's got some information to share with you about how this whole thing came up, and how the PLA came to be, and how that he's using it with other people right now. And then after that, we will move into helping you guys create your own PLA. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the videos of the other, our ambassadors. And then I'm going to give Greg control. Let's see.
Finally, I get control.
You're getting it all.
No, I'm making a joke. I don't have control of my household. I live with the grandkids.
That's right. I forgot. You do have somebody else running the show. Okay. I'm going to start the slideshow. Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to this Parkinson's Life Assessment Workshop. It was a goal of mine to, once I had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, to kind of continue to live what I had preached all of my life as a warlord of commerce. I had been one of those type A hard driving people. My daughters are all like their mother, very intelligent and in gifted education programs. They'd get all A's and a B on the report card, and Dad would come home from work and say, hey, what do we got to do to get that B up to an A? I can tell you that on the anniversary of my diagnosis every year, I send an email out to my daughters, sons-in-laws, and wives and good friends and ask, what do they notice about me? What's changed in the previous year? Because what I'm concerned about is I don't want to be the frog in the proverbial pot that you slowly turn up the temperature and eventually the frog says, what smells so good? And that's him cooking. So I've been told by my wife and children that Parkinson's has made me actually a better person because I'm kinder and gentler and far more effective at communication and listening. And so what I've tried to do is take some of the things that I've learned in my life. I wrote a book. It's called Rising Above Parkinson's. And I talk about a number of different models that helped me in my life in learning to deal with Parkinson's and the many symptoms that, whether they're motor, non-motor, or psychological, that are a part of that. If you move to the first slide. I talk about atomic events quite a bit in my book, and I define an atomic event, as any adverse event that has catastrophic impacts that you feel you have no control over. And if you don't properly harness that energy, it's going to destroy you rather than empower you. So I've heard phrases in my life like, I'm sorry, but your mother didn't survive surgery. I've been diagnosed with cancer. The biopsy found advanced cancer cells in my prostate. My child was involved in a date rape, and I heard that from a social worker, and I've heard the phrase, you have Parkinson's. So in my life, unfortunately, I've had a lot of practice at dealing with atomic events. And one of the things I've noticed with atomic events, whether people blame it on Murphy's Law or Kismet or just bad juju, but there's something about that shock and awe that when you hear that phrase, you have Parkinson's, it seems to have a catastrophic event on your impact on your life, unless you focus the energy that's created from that and create kind of the new normal. Next slide. So you have Parkinson's. Those are words that approximately 1.2 million people in the United States, probably 8 million in the world, have heard. And I don't know about you all, but it elicited a lot of different thoughts. One thing I was like, well, I've heard of Parkinson's, but I don't know exactly what it is. Then I wanted to know, how did I get it? What did I do something wrong? Then you get into the why me phase, almost the denial. But because I had learned a model called fear, future expectations appear real. Fear is a human condition in our brains where we don't know the future, but we forecast or we put expectations on what might happen in the future based on stories we've heard in the past or things that we've lived. So things that created fear in my life is I don't want to be a burden on anybody. I only knew working, so what was going to happen now that I had Parkinson's. Joe talked about he noticed that his typing slowed down. Mine slowed down from 20 words a minute to about 7 words a minute. So that ended my typing career forever. Losing independence, oh boy, that was a huge fear of mine. And certainly, what does it do to your lifespan? It can't do much to improve it. So one of the things that I try and work with people, newly diagnosed people through some groups here in Colorado, is helping people to understand fear is natural. It's something that everybody goes through. And it's something that we can all learn to live with. Next slide, please. I'm a big fan of being the master and commander of the good ship Parkinson's in my life. I can't do anything about being out on the ocean on a ship, but what I can do is be in control and of my response to that. Viktor Frankl is a famous psychologist. He lived through Auschwitz, if you can believe that. He came up with a phrase called responsibility. He said, we're all responsible for things that happen in our lives, but we can choose to be responsible, meaning choosing the response that we have to any thing that pops up in our lives. Things that, phrases you'll hear in these self-oriented outcomes, self-efficacy. That's your ability to perform cognitive and physical tactics to produce a desired result. I believe that I can control the things that happen in my life to make a positive achievement out of anything that happens to me. I've done it with the loss of loved ones. I've done it with helping daughters get through traumatic psychological events. And I've done it through cancer, beating cancer, and now living with Parkinson's. One of the things that I've noticed, and you probably have noticed, everybody's Parkinson's is a little bit different. So because of that, how we respond and work out dealing with Parkinson's, the disease has been around for 200 years. James Parkinson first wrote about the disease in 1817 when he noticed people in foggy London town shuffling down the road. It strikes me that after 200 years, there's no known cause and no known cure. We have a good idea that some Parkinson's might be genetically related. We have a good idea that there might be environmental toxins, but after 200 years, we can't put our finger on a biological marker. And I think one of the reasons for that is that Parkinson's is not one disease. Parkinson's is a syndrome or a collection of things that happen. And so my belief is that if we, as people with Parkinson's, take a more self-oriented approach to how we're doing it, we can, in essence, rise above what's going on in our lives hence the picture of the title of the book that I wrote about taking that negative energy and spiraling up. Next slide, please. Lots of people, say, "Oh, geez, Greg, you're too analytical. My approach is one of those things that it doesn't come naturally to you." But for a lot of people, I think once they kind of get used to what I'm saying, they make it their own, and they start to see where through repetition, doing it over and over and over again, you don't just do this Parkinson's life assessment once. You'll do it for a long time, the rest of your career. So basically, levels of learning, at first you're unconsciously incompetent, meaning you're unaware you're not good at something. Then you become consciously incompetent. You start to say, I'd like to be able to do that. Finally, through hours of practice, you become consciously competent. If you think about it, you can get it done. Say, think of driving a car, for example. And for those who really fall in love with something and put in at least 10,000 hours, you can become unconsciously competent. Those are athletes, musicians, artists, the people that they don't even think about what they're doing and they create beautiful work. The sigmoid curve is from the business world. This is how you move from one product line to the next product line to the next product line. But it's important to understand that when you first come up or hear of an idea, you will dip. You can see on the red curve from point A, as you're rising, you're going to dip. There's doubt, there's uncertainty. You're not good at something. You have to practice it from the levels of learning that we talked about. So expect that when you first get involved with something, you'll have questions, you'll have concerns, you'll have things that you're trying to work through. But then quickly, because you notice the bottom axis is time, rather quickly, you start to have an upswing. And then once you get the hang of it, boy, hang on, because it's going to be a going Jesse, and you tend to see huge growth. Over time, however, that growth changes. I believe it was Judy that said, you have to do this over time because you go through these different phases in your life. And that's exactly right. That's what these sigmoid curves are that we're trying to go. Next slide. So let's get into what a Parkinson's life assessment actually is. The way I broke it down was start with the basics and kind of build from there. I graded all the motor, non-motor, and psychological symptoms that I could read and study. And by the way, the Davis-Phinney Foundation has a phenomenal notebook for people to work with. They do the Every Victory Counts, and it lists all these motor skills, these symptoms from Parkinson's. So what I did was real simple on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 is, the best. 1 is the worst. I just simply went through and said, how's bradykinesia? That's not too hard for me. Constipation? Oh boy, not my favorite. And so I went through all of those, and it appeared to me rather quickly that my Parkinson's symptoms were clustered around certain areas. So once I had identified those critical factors, I then decided, well, what am I doing about trying to improve those? And so I identified those factors. And again, from the business world, that's a market share analysis. You can see that in a pie chart. You can see it in a bar gram, however you want to look at it. But what I did was, you have to make all of the factors that are impacting your life that you're trying to use, you have to make equal to 100. Then once you have those factors figured out, I did this over a period of time. I've been doing this for about 6 years now. I determined that in the business world, management is always about allocating scarce resources to maximize your return. So the way you do that is called ROI, or return on investment. The two factors that I picked for my return on investment rationale were time. I mentioned earlier, I'm in the fourth quarter. I have one timeout left. I got to make sure that what I'm doing is an effective and efficient use of time in my life for my grandchildren, my children, friends, and certainly my wife. So the two factors that I picked are time, and the other is cost. I'm retired, so I have to pay attention to where I'm spending money and make sure I'm getting my biggest bang for the buck. And so what you'll do, and we'll talk about this and show you as we walk through this, you simply take the weight that you had assigned to any individual factor and multiply that times your ROI rationale, and that gives you a new score. So your original weight can either go up or down in value depending upon how much time, for me, or expense. Now, time and expense are important to me, but might not be important to you. Energy might be one of them. Do you have the energy to do what these important factors are? Independence, caregiver. Do you need a caregiver's help to apply that? So we'll talk about all those as we go through the different ambassadors, because you'll see for every one of them, while exercise and things like diets and doctors and pharmaceuticals probably appear on virtually everybody's list, there are many things that don't appear. I, for example, get a lot out of doing yoga along with my exercises, helps me with my balance and that type of thing. So what you're really trying to do in a nutshell is take your Parkinson's life assessment, find the key factors that help you the most, identify the rationale that you're going to say, hey, I get a better bang for my buck when I exercise with friends than if I go to the doctor a lot and paint or play music or any of those kind of things. So that's what you're ultimately trying to do with the Parkinson's life assessment. Next slide. So here's what it looks like in spreadsheet format. I was always in upper management and always looking at the bottom line and trying to talk with bankers and folks like that. So this is how I think. But on a spreadsheet, you just plug in your numbers. You'll notice that in the first column, it lists the Parkinson's life assessment and it has the factors. My factors, there were 12 of them. I would recommend that you have at least 5, but I would ask that you probably not have more than 20, because if you get 30 or 40 factors, each factor is so infinitesimally small, you can't tell whether they're having any kind of significant impact. So I have 12 factors, starting with exercise and emotional therapies. You'll notice that my 2 rationale, time and costs, I have high time for exercise. It takes a lot of time to exercise, and I exercise 7 days a week. Cost is fairly nominal once you have the equipment, unless you want to, pay money to belong to an exclusive gym or something like that. The cost is really rather low. So my ROI multiplier turns out to be 1. So 1 times the weight I give exercise of 14 gives me an ROI factor of 14, factored ROI. Now you notice that in the light purple color, the second column, all of those factors total 100% down at the bottom where it says total. Some items you'll find, and this is the importance of ROI, some items like emotional therapies, it has the same weight as exercise, but because I enjoy the emotional therapies, and we'll talk about what those are in just a second, but that's things like family, faith, friends, time I spend with them. I don't really notice the time flying by. So I don't associate a high time cost to that. Cost, there's a cost to taking your grandkids camping or, you know, whatever it is. So I assign that a medium level. So you can see that ROI multiplier is 1.25. So between exercise and emotional therapies, while they both have a weight of 14 in my life, things that I do with emotional therapies are slightly better return. So that's 17.5. Now you can go the other way. Diet and nutrition is important to me. I give it a weight of 13, but it has a medium time assessment and a high cost. So now it ends up only scoring 9.75. Whereas yoga, which has a lower weight of 10, but it doesn't take a ton of time, has medium cost, and you can do it for free if you want to watch virtual stuff at home. But you can see that actually grows to 12.5. So to me, that's what is the key to this PLA spreadsheet, is to try and make this flexible so that it fits anybody's lifestyle. There is no one way to do a Parkinson's life assessment correctly. Everybody's factors are going to be different. You can certainly start with mine and add or subtract from there. Everybody's weights that they assign to those factors are going to be different. You might use different rationale for your ROI calculation than I did with time and cost, and thus everybody's score. But the key to your ROI is if your weights equal 100, you want your ROI to be anything more than 100. That means you're getting your bang for a buck. And I've seen scores in 107, 109, 110. So that's telling you you're spending your time optimally. And that's what you would look at and compare in any given time frame. If any of the ambassadors have something that they'd like to say, now would be a good time to kind of step in and we could talk about each of yours and how yours is applicable in your life.
So you'd have to unmute yourself if you guys want to talk, because I think you've all been muted. If anybody has anything to share about
Greg, when I did mine.
Is this Joe?
Yes, Joe.
Okay.
I noticed, like for my exercise, when I use it as an example, I do a lot of exercise too. I do about 2 or 3 hours. When I'm working 2 or 3 hours a day. I'm doing a big walkathon right now over the summer. But like you said, if it takes a medium time, but I can set the costs at low because all I'm doing is walking on the trails. It'd be very different, like you said, if I went out to the gym or hired a trainer. If I hired a trainer for 35 bucks an hour, you know, the benefit would be outplaced by the cost. So I think as you can see the model, when I think of what my model looks now, I would say it's a mature model. And I've weeded out the expensive stuff because we're retired too. Weeded out the expensive stuff and found stuff that I could do economically within a reasonable length of time and keep on moving.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I failed to do the ROI multiplier, and that definitely was the reason that exercise had such a low ROI for me. Had I added the multiplier, it would have been much higher. But what I'm also finding was that the time that I exercised, as well as the time that I spent with family and relatives, social relations, that I could put those two together and get a far larger return on investment because I did the two together. I'd go skiing with my husband, or I'd, you know, take my grandson for a walk, or all those things that I did with other people. So if you can find two of your loves and put them together, then you're certainly going to have a higher return on investment.
Mel, is it possible to show Joe's PLA?
Sure.
Because that's going to answer a bunch of the questions that are coming in.
Great.
And
Okay.
Joe, are you comfortable with, because
Oh, yeah.
yours is going to show the whole thing.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. And if I can, I'm noticing in the chat that a lot of people are asking, how did I get the ROI multiplier? So if you see right above the pie chart, it says ROI multiplier. I just written, this is just random, but I assigned, if something has a high cost to it, or it takes a lot of time, out of a factor of 1, I only give it a positive impact of 0.25. If something is median, it's 50-50. And if something is low, doesn't have high cost, doesn't take a lot of time, I'll give it a little better value. I'll do a 0.75. So you can see what Joe, you can jump in anytime here. On your exercise, you give that an initial value or weight of 18.
Yeah.
And then you give it a time needed, a medium, and cost required a low. So that gives you a 1.25, and you multiply 18 times 1.25 and you get a 22.5. So that appears to be your highest factor.
Yeah, and the same to Patty's point, I do 2 walks during the day. My first walk is with my wife and 2 dogs. So, you know, I make sure that you fit things together so it doesn't seem like a total isolated event. Exercise is not just me walking, it's our whole group.
Mm-hmm.
So I also put in some examples for each one of those things too. I just walk
That's a great addition. Tell us about that.
Well, I was thinking about what do I use most to make those work. And diet and nutrition is really interesting because I found a software program called Forks Over Knives. It's a vegetarian program. And so I have it on my computer and I access through the internet. And every week it suggests a menu. I adjust the menu to my wife and I's preference. And then it kicks out a shopping list for me. I check that against my groceries in the kitchen. And then I simply go out and buy exactly what I need for the week. And that not only saves me $1 or $2 every week, but also takes the stress away from trying to cook something and not having the ingredients in the house. I'm the cook in the house. My wife actually still works. And I know I don't deal well with stress. So if I'm trying to make something, and some of my friends said, oh, I was cooking last night and went back to the store 2 or 3 times. Well, after 2 or 3 times to the store, I'd be such a mess with my Parkinson's. I couldn't continue. So this takes away all the stress of knowing I got the food in the fridge for the menu for the week.
All right. Yeah, and again, looking at Joe's, this is the total PLA, whereas before we were just looking at the one section. Anything you can do to help explain to yourself what you're trying to improve on is going to help you, because you have the ability to look at both positive and negative impacts. You know, for you, Joe, it seems your walking is something you really enjoy doing, but there's probably a negative side to it at times when you go, oh, I got to walk and it's raining or whatever it would be.
Right. Greg, can you explain a little bit about the percentage for the pie? Like what is the value of that?
Sure, absolutely. So going back to motor, non-motor, and psychological symptoms of Parkinson's, I went through each one of them and gave it a score of 1 to 5. I then added up in, say, for example, tremor. As you know, I tremor on my right side fairly significantly. Doesn't bother me except for no soup in the restaurant and you got to watch shaving. So I've learned to become ambidextrous and use my left hand a lot more. But my point is, I identified things that I do to try and help with my tremor, for example. And these are the factors that I came up with. Now, by assigning them a weight so that it all adds up to 100, that's where you see the different shapes or colors or slices of pie. So what again, being a business person, I tend to look at markets as my whole life is market share 100%. So I'm trying to live 100% of my life. And so I attributed those factors and then the computer just shows you the color and the size of that. The ROI impact really comes in over on the bar graph or the histogram here, because you can see that some things rise and some things stay the same depending upon what your ROI factor. Again, the easiest way to describe that is you're just trying to get a bang for your buck for the time that you put into it or the money that you spend. What's the return? Because some things make you feel better, but you have to put so much time into it that it's really difficult. For example, one of them on mine is supplements. I'm a big fan of, there's to me a difference between diet and nutrition. Diet is what you're eating. Nutrition is what your body is using. So if you look at supplements, I give it a weight of 9. I know it's important, but because it takes a medium level of time, but is very expensive because my insurance doesn't carry any of that, cover those costs, I'm buying it all. My ROI goes down to 7. Whereas a support group from Parkinson that I participate in, it has an initial weight of 6. It's not as important to me as supplements, but because there's low time and low cost, now it actually rises to a 9. So if I'm looking at my return on investment, I'd rather spend time, quality time at a good presentation with my support group than take vitamin D3, B complex, and C. Does one help my body? Sure, no question about it. The other helps my soul. And maybe that has a little more impact on my attitude and behaviors in a given day. Does that make sense?
Patty?
Yeah. Hey, Greg, you know, I thought of the initial column on the graph as being one of the most important things to you. And I didn't factor in the enjoyment level. Can you explain how you can make that work into your return on investment?
Great. So I just put up Patty's if you can
Sure. Yeah, I'll use
Like,
her.
look at exercise there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have relationships and family as 14 as your initial weight. That's important to you. And what you're saying with the 14 for exercise is you see that as just as important. However, because exercise has medium cost, but relationship and family to you has a lower cost to you, it's actually a difference of almost 7 points.
Yeah, so it brings me a low ROI, and I think there should be some way to factor in the enjoyment, of it. And maybe that's what that first column, or the first set of numbers ought to have represented.
And one other way to do it, although this can make the spreadsheet more complicated, just depends on, I've tried to keep it as simple and as flexible as possible, but an additional rationale for you, in addition to time and cost, might be enjoyment.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
So Greg, if somebody is, let's say, I know time is an issue. It's hard to take time and cost out, but let's say somebody is, retired and just has nothing but time on their hands. Like there's just all the time in the world. And they could conceivably say, like, I'm not even going to put time on there. I'm going to put enjoyment and cost, because I actually, all the things, I don't really mind spending time on any of them. Right. So that's one way to look at it. And in which case, Patty, the time is maybe high for relationships and exercise and family, but like you love all the time that you're spending there. So maybe it's giving a false sense of like, that's high when it's really not. Is that, am I looking at that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that would work though in this setup, because both time and cost are considered negatives, not positives.
Okay.
So if you say it has high enjoyment instead of high cost, I think it's going to work the math in the opposite direction.
Mm.
And Bart, what you would do is just add that as a separate column, as just another multiplier, because all you're trying to do is just say, what really influences my life? What really gets me up in the morning? Every morning I wake up and go, oh, good, another day. And then instantly you go, with Parkinson's.
And that's the percent of the pie. That's the positive.
Mm-hmm. So you could
Friends get me up in the morning. Exercise gets me up in the morning. Doctors don't really get me up in the morning, but I think they help me live a better life. I don't know if you want to pull mine up there.
Sure. Okay, Bart, you wanna?
Yeah, Bart.
So if you look at the bottom right, the bar charts, it looks like I'm investing appropriately in friends because the bars are even, and I'm not investing in exercise enough. Let me scroll that down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the piece of the pie is higher than my ROI, so I need to bring that ROI up by.
Mm-hmm.
Is that spending more time on it, or less time on it? I forget the way the math goes. But go ahead.
I was simply going to say, the way I've done the scoring with the high, medium, and low of 0.25, 0.5, and 0.75, anything that you're doing that you associate a lower value to, meaning it doesn't cost you as much, you don't care how much chronological time you're taking because you're enjoying the time. Patty's having fun with her relationship while she's exercising with her friends, skiing or hiking. So if you wanted, Bart, and again, this is what I tried to do to make the tool so that it can be as flexible as possible. If you had a particular category that you said, I want to flip that scale so that high means I get a high, and low means I'm Eeyore all day, you would just reverse those numbers. You could approach any given factor by just reversing the weight that's associated with the rationale.
Got it.
Right. So like in Patty's case, you could also say she could keep time, but on her exercise and on family, she just puts an L. She's just low because
Right.
it values it so much. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
what I tried to do is make a tool so that, because everybody's Parkinson's is different and everybody lives their lives differently. Some people like to socialize while they work out. Other people would go, I don't want to talk to people. I want to work out. So however people want to associate the numbers, the key is you're trying to make sure, and Bart's doing a good job here, his ROI factor column adds up to 107.25 when the weight is only that. You know, think of that. That's a 7% bang for your buck. That's better. If that were under 100, that would tell you you're wasting resources. You're not getting the return that you want. And then you would go over here and look at your positive and negative columns.
Right on the bar chart.
Yeah, on the bar chart, that's K and I. And you could look and see, just at a glance, you can go, I got to figure out travel. My guess is with travel, it's the expense.
Yeah.
You know, because I think most people like to travel, but it's hard to travel a lot, at least for me.
Can you answer a couple of these questions that have come in?
Yeah.
So the spreadsheets have labels, but time is limited no matter who you are, since there's only 24 hours in a day. Do you have to use cost? And if not, what else would you recommend? I believe you had said something, we said some about energy. That could be another one. What else could people?
Enjoyment.
Oh, go ahead.
How much they enjoyed something. They could rank it on enjoyment.
Right. Independence, you had said, Greg. Great.
Right. Independence. Patty and Judy just talked about enjoyment could be a factor. The key is you're trying to make sure that you're getting more out of your life, not less out of your life, by the things that you're doing to battle Parkinson's.
Right.
So Parkinson's is the ship we're on. What do we do to be the master and commander of that ship? That ship's not taking me somewhere. I'm taking that ship somewhere.
Great.
And so whatever those factors are, could be independence, could be transportation, it could be caregiver needs. There's a lot of different factors. I'm blessed with a phenomenal wife of 42 years and great family support. So for me, it's my time and the cost. That's why I chose those two rationale for the ROI.
Great. So let's see. Someone said the spreadsheets have labels for month and year. Do these factors and relative percentage require monthly reassessment? I think that's an important question, just in general. How often do you recommend people sort of revisit this assessment?
Yeah, that's a great question. From my business experience, I do what is called Delphi analysis. I don't really care what the number is, whether it's 107.25 or 105.20. I care the direction the number is going. I'm looking for what's called trend analysis. Is the number going up? Is the number going flat? Is the number going down? And when things start going down, that's when you go, I'm not getting as much out of this as I used to, because I've been doing it for 6 years. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer 6 years ago. And that's the real trigger event when I was battling both Parkinson's and radiation treatment for the prostate cancer. That's when I decided I don't have the time and energy to do everything that everybody wants me to do. So I got to figure out what works for me. That's that internal locus of control. Control, we all have some degree of control over what we're doing. Locus is a phrase that you mean, at what point do you know you're getting a bang for your buck? You're making an impact. And internal, I believe I can control what happens to me. I can't control events, but I can control my response. That's that Viktor Frankl response ability. So the factors might change over time. When you initially do this, I did it once a quarter just so I could get some data points to plot. Now, I generally do it once a year at the beginning of the year.
I would also suggest that when you have a change of life, whether it's retirement, change in family status, or quarantine, it could change your numbers. I know the quarantine would have had a major impact on mine.
Great.
Absolutely.
And this is a couple of great questions here. Is the factor related to what one should be doing for Parkinson's, or is it what you view as valuable or enjoyable, just in general? Greg, do you want to answer that? Is this
Sure.
specific for PD?
The answer is like the answer to every question in the world. It depends. It depends on where you're at. Generally, I would say your factors should be a combination of what is good for you, what we know through science, through working with our neurologists, through studying the drugs that are available, and the therapies that seem to be making sense. So they can change as those things change, but there's also got to be an element of this has got to be what you want to do. If suddenly science found out that all concert pianists do not have Parkinson's, then I would, say, for me, you'll notice music isn't any one of my factors on there. The only musical instrument I play is the radio. And so that might be good for Parkinson's, but Greg's probably not going to participate because I'm not too musically inclined. But if it's about doing another yoga pose, I'm all in. Let's. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody's Parkinson's is different, so everybody's response and the factors that they're going to put in should be different as well.
Great. And I'm curious to know, Joe, Bart, Patty, Judy, and Greg too at the very beginning, did any of you have your significant other, care partner, spouse, kids look at your PLA, and did they offer anything that you were, I didn't know that, or they offered a sense of, just by kind of watching you that you made changes to or anything?
Yeah, Dan looked mine over a little bit and had some input. Agreed with most of the stuff I had put there. Another factor that I was thinking about last night was that we haven't really talked about those things that are of lasting value. Do you know what I mean? Long-term value. And I don't know, up until Parkinson's, I had this FOMO thing, fear of missing out. And now I have to be more selective with what I do. And I just wrote something down. Can I read this to you guys? It's pretty short.
Mm-hmm.
On my graph, volunteering, learning, teaching, serving others didn't really, as you first looked at it, didn't seem to have very high return on investment. But I still think that we with Parkinson's need to continue to pour our lives into others' lives. We each have a wealth of experience, some great and some not so great. They're newbies to the Parkinson's world who we can encourage and mentor and come alongside. And as we pour ourselves into other people, then we start to forget about ourselves and our past and our present day struggles. But those challenging times also produce in us perseverance and character and endurance and hope about the things that are yet to come. And there were times where we learned to be more compassionate toward others who are facing challenges of their own. So, you know, there's some lasting value stuff that it's not part of this chart, but it definitely made me think about those things in a deeper way, I guess.
Very good. Very well said.
Thanks.
Great.
I'll share, I'm a person of deep faith, and I include faith in my factor of emotional therapies. To me, that's where family, friends, physiologically, you want a good shot of serotonin, which is the feel-good chemical of our brains. You do something good for somebody else. And you'll get more serotonin than you can shake a stick at. So I, without wanting to, make spirituality a talking point per se, I try to encompass mine in the emotional therapies. That's where I try and put that in there.
Great.
Well, I'm really good at shaking sticks.
Go ahead, Bart.
I'd add to that one of the things that I do is I participate in over 35 research studies where I know that the nature of the beast is not really going to be helpful to me, but I get great satisfaction from it because I feel less like a victim and more like a warrior, if you will.
Right.
Yeah, that's something. I don't know if I can't remember. Did you put that on your?
No, I
It's
put it
on
under the
mine, too.
category of doctors,
Okay.
but I didn't call it out separately.
Okay. Yeah, but your doctors were actually higher, right, than the.
Yeah, after friends and exercise, there's the
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That's super interesting. What were, as I'm just imagining everybody kind of leaving the call in a little while and sitting down to do their chart, what were some of the challenges, if any, that any of you had that you want to share and say, oh, here was a challenge and this is how I dealt with it?
Well, I wanted mine to be balanced, so I took different factors and figured out which was most helpful for my emotional, cognitive, or physical. And that helped me balance the different factors a little bit better.
Great.
Making
So
sure I
like
covered one of those.
under each of those three factors, you had some
Correct.
of the deeper factors that you looked at. Okay.
Right.
Now, I took a look at them from perspective of what stage I'm in my Parkinson's, because I think there's 3 different stages that could be identified. And the first stage is the emotional stage, where I'm trying to figure out how to deal with this new situation emotionally and that sort of thing. Then the second stage is to start working on the physical part of it, the exercise, the diet. And the third one ends up being the cognitive, which I think we get to in a row. I feel I'm in the cognitive stage now where I can feel myself having some cognitive decline. And I've really got to work hard on keeping active and bright and relevant, I guess. So if that helps. So I find that my chart sort of represents me in my third stage of where I'm at, what I need to do.
Great.
And if I can, that's an area that I've been focusing on this year, Joe. Same thing. I've noticed I'm not as sharp attack as I used to be. Starting to become the dull tool in the box. And I've started taking online classes. Hillsdale College offers free classes. A lot of organizations offer classes. And I've made it a point, this was my daughter's idea when she was looking at my factors. Mel, you were talking about people giving you input. My daughter came up with the idea every year I should take up something new that I didn't used to do before I had Parkinson's. Because the perception is that Parkinson's takes stuff away from you. I can't do this as good. I love fly fishing, but I have a little bit of a hard time tying flies with those little tiny fingers moving around. So you want to get to your point in your life where you go, I'm doing things now that I didn't used to do prior to Parkinson's. Hiking up 14,000 foot mountains, which I do, and with one of my daughters. So, you know, find things that you can do, that you can try, that expand your horizon, and try and keep your brain as sharp. We know it's getting dull. Part of it's age. We hate to admit that. I do, at least. But part of it's got to be Parkinson's. But whatever you can do to live a more effective and efficient life, and thrive, then that's hopefully what this tool will help people identify and see it more readily.
Right. And they say learning something new also, yes, it trains your brain and does all that, but it also slows time down. Right. So as we get older, we don't learn many people don't sort of seek out the new things we've never done before. And we're like, why is time going by so fast? If you wanted to slow down, learn something new.
That's true.
Learn a language. I've been doing Duolingo every day since I got diagnosed. And
Wow.
yeah.
What are you learning?
Spanish.
Excellent. So you should get in touch with Kayla, because she's Duolingo obsessed as well. And she's also trying to learn. Well, she said she's going to learn like 3 or 4 languages by the end of the year.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah.
That's great. Let's see. Okay, so this is a great question. When you got your first chart completed, how did you actually use it for the panelists? And Larry, just so you know, they just got their first chart completed, I think maybe a week or within the last couple of weeks. And so this is new to many of them as well, even though some of them may be, sort of working with maybe something similar. But how have you guys used it so far?
I'll address, for me, I found the instrument, the Parkinson's Life Assessment, a great tool when I go and talk with my neurologist, because oftentimes you experience some symptom changing, either getting more intense or less intense, or stronger or lighter. And you go, I got to make a note to tell doctor such and such that. When you walk in with an instrument like this, it gives you a platform to walk down every one of those factors. And why did you give it this weight when last year you gave it that weight? And you go, for example, in my early PLA charts, I used to have participating in studies on there. But as all of us Parkies know, the longer you've had Parkinson's, the less of a golden guinea pig you are to science and the studies of, will this drug have an impact or that drug, because you've been taking Parkinson's drugs for too long. They don't know if it's the impact of the medicine or just, age and the fact that you've had Parkinson's for a while. So I find the Parkinson's Life Assessment tool a great instrument to use when you're talking to your doctors or the pharmacist or your general practitioner.
That actually brings up an interesting point. So many of you had RX, you had prescriptions on there. And aside from the cost, I think one of the interesting things that makes it would be definitely go into your doctor is that what if you experience a lot of off time and a lot of your day is trying to navigate, when am I going to be able to do something? Like, when am I going to feel good enough to do the things that are super important to me? And so you might be spending an inordinate amount of time either off or trying to not be off. And that's something great to share with your doctor when you're saying, it's a super high cost. I am getting not the ROI. I think that is definitely a way to look at the prescriptions, because I think that that's one of the things that we've learned over the many years of doing surveys around OFF, is that people don't talk about it enough. They don't talk about it with their doctor enough. And if they actually look at it through this chart and say, this is impacting my ability to do all the other things that make me feel good, that could start a great conversation. Let's see. Any insight, comments about speech and speech support programs? Well, yes, we do. There are a lot of different programs, and I can share some of those in the follow-up. And did any of you, maybe we could talk a little bit about those of you who put things like physical therapy or speech therapy on your chart as you know, maybe you put it under alternative therapies. Yes, Judy?
I do something called Loud Crowd. It's a way to practice with encouraging your voice exercises, your speech intentionality, as well as your cognitive improvement. And it's through the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab at Northwestern University. We meet once a week. Right now we're doing it virtually. And it's very good. It's like a different support group. You get to know the people, but it's a good way to practice your speaking skills. So I would highly recommend that.
Great.
I took a course, the LSVT course.
Yes, it's similar.
One trick that I learned to do it, to keep practicing, you're supposed to do these for as long as you can, but I don't want to show off and take a little time. But what I do is when I microwave something, I hum along with the microwave, and I can time how long I'm doing it. And it doesn't, you know, it's something to do while you're waiting for the microwave to finish.
That's great. That is great. This is an excellent question. As a caregiver, do you suggest we have our own PLA? Our time is extremely limited, and we also need to know how to get the best bang for your buck. Absolutely. Like we said, this Parkinson's life assessment, it's a life assessment. And absolutely, gosh, how important it is for the care partners out there listening to do this for yourself. Absolutely. Did any of you who are doing it talk to your care partners about doing it? Greg, has your wife done it, or?
Absolutely. You're both in this together. And I'll speak for myself. My wife and I are in this together. And she does her version because I'm interested in her rationale of time and cost. What does she see? You know, sometimes you're the frog in the pot and you don't notice the changes in yourself because they're happening to you gradually, whereas someone else, you know, says, hey, Grandpa, do you notice your arm doesn't swing while we hike? You know, and you're like, yeah, it does, watch. Because you're consciously doing it. So yes, absolutely. My wife and I do this together because I want her input in what she sees.
I noticed somebody had a comment about singing along anytime they heard music, and as good for their voice. And it also helps you to hum along. And I don't understand exactly why this is, but some functional neurologist told me that humming is good for our brains. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but singing along for sure, you know, as long as you're in the shower or alone.
I'll start humming too.
Huh?
I'll start humming also.
Yeah. Great.
I mentioned I'm not very musically oriented. I actually had my middle daughter at a Christmas Eve singing Silent Night. My daughter asked me, Dad, would you quit singing? You're ruining the beautiful sound. And you're like,
Well, I sang.
Some of us, either hum or maybe we'll snap our fingers.
I sang to my husband at our wedding, and all of his friends were worried that he was going to sing back to me.
Aw, that's great. Okay, let's see. Does anybody have any other comments that they want to make about it before we, end this and let people go off and and do their own. Is there anything that you want to say, Greg, before we say goodbye?
Well, just that if people have a question or concern, feel free to contact me. I have devoted my life to making Parkinson's wish it had never met me. And I would love to put that on my tombstone if you want.
Great.
If I can help people out answering questions or concerns, again, I covered this PLA in chapter 14 and a number of different parts of it in my book, Rising Above Parkinson. So people want to get a copy of that, that's cool.
Great.
Any way I can help.
Great. And I put my my email there too. So if you have any follow-up questions that you want me to share with the group, feel free to do that and I'll make sure that those get out. I will share the slides with everybody. I will share the recording with everybody. I think it'll be really helpful once you go sit down again. You could listen to this first part of the session as he explains some of the different factors as you're working on yours. So you'll have that. Yes, we can get you a template for the spreadsheet. I'm sure we can make that happen. Anything else from our ambassadors? Who thank you so much for being willing to share your own PLA assessment. It makes it so helpful when someone can actually look at it and say like, oh, this is different, and this is how I know to kind of think about my own.
It's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Patty, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just real quick, realize, you know, a lot of us put relationships down as valuable things to us. That loneliness is a huge thing for people with Parkinson's. And even if we're exercising 30 minutes every day of the week, if we're lonely, our cognition goes down and, you know, depression creeps in. And so try to put social relationships as a high value for your spreadsheet.
Great. Joe, Bart, anything?
I just wanted to say, if I'm going to try to follow up and use this a few times, I'll be posting the information on my website. I got just joewithpd.com.
Great.
Especially if there are any Canadians in the group.
Well, this has been fun because Joe has made another friend that knows Joe's son, which is super fun. Like, what are the chances of that? So yes, joewithpd.com. He just put that up there. Bart, any final words you'd like to share?
Yeah, I thank the group for pointing this out, that I really didn't give the research its fair shake. It helps me a lot in my happiness, and I need to grow that part of the pie.
Great. Excellent. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for being here. We will follow up with information. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. And thank you, Greg, so much for sharing this assessment tool. And thank you, Patty, Judy, Bart, and Joe for helping out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.